Hey y'all, welcome back. This week we're just going to be doing some slow autumn cooking and just see what the day brings us, where it takes us. This week we're going to start out with making some chicken noodle soup. Now this recipe is on my blog, so I will leave all of these recipes linked down in the description box below. But my daughter's not feeling well today, so we're going to make chicken soup. I've got some olive oil here. It's going in the pan. We're just going to heat that up over medium-low heat. We're going to add in some diced carrots, celery, and onion, and we're going to season that up with some salt. And we're going to give that a little toss around the pan, and we're going to let this cook for about 5 to 8 minutes, just until those vegetables are nice and tender. Alright, once those vegetables are nice and tender, we're going to go in and add about 3 to 4 cloves of garlic. Garlic is very good for you when you're sick and not feeling well, so we're going to add some of that in there. We're also going to add in some onion powder, some garlic powder, and some thyme. And we're just going to mix that around and kind of let that toast up a little bit, just so it brings out the flavors of all of those spices. Now it doesn't take long for the spices to start to bloom. As soon as it hits the pan, it usually takes about 10 seconds before you start to smell it. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Alright, and now we're just going to go in and add our chicken broth. Now since I'm not cooking this in the crock pot, I'm going to double up the liquid. So I'm going to add about 10 cups of chicken broth in here. Now this is quite a big pot, so you're not going to be able to tell that it's a lot of liquid, but I added 10 cups of liquid. Then I'm going to add the chicken in, a bay leaf, and I'm going to stir that around and kind of bring this up to a boil over medium heat. I'm going to turn the heat down to medium-low to low, and we're just going to let this simmer for about an hour to an hour and a half. You can use a rotisserie chicken or you can cook your own chicken, but either way works just fine. So we're just going to go ahead and let this cook for about an hour to an hour and a half. An hour and a half later, the house is smelling good. This is almost done. We're going to go ahead and add in 8 ounces of pasta. I'm using egg noodles, but you can use whatever kind of pasta you want as long as it's about 8 to 9 ounces. So we're just going to put that in there and let this cook another 15 minutes or so until the pasta is cooked completely through and it's kind of tender. But you still want a nice bite in the center. So we're going to go ahead and let it do its thing. 20 minutes later, we're going to go ahead and take the bay leaf out. Now the egg noodles are nice and tender. They still have a slight bite to the center, but it's okay. It's going to continue to kind of cook as the pasta is sitting. But we're going to go ahead and take the bay leaf out. We're going to add in some peas. Now the peas are optional. If you don't want peas in your soup, you don't have to add them. But we're going to add those in there along with about a cup of cream. You can do milk or half and half. They both work fine. You're just going to add that in there, give it a stir, let that heat through about 5 minutes or so, check the seasoning, and this is done. Alright y'all, it is time to dig in. Now I did go out and get some fresh parsley, kind of chop that up and added that to the soup, but you don't have to do that. You can add whatever you want to this and you can serve this however you want. I made some biscuits the day before so I just served my chicken noodle soup with some biscuits. My daughter, she's not quite a biscuit fan, but she just had it as is. It was so good, so creamy. You're gonna love this soup, so be sure to check out all the links in the description box for all of these delicious, yummy recipes. All right, y'all, today we're going to be doing some more slow country cooking. I've got some beans that I want to make. So we're going to make some butter beans, we're going to make some cornbread, and some fried potatoes and onions. It's going to be so good. First, we're going to start off with our beans. I've got my big Dutch oven here. Well, it's my small Dutch oven, but I've got that going over some heat, medium low, and I've got some bacon here. Now you can use any kind of meat that you want. Typically, I would use some salt pork, maybe some pre-cooked ham, leftover ham from Thanksgiving, just whatever you have on hand. Sometimes I will do like a ham hock. I don't have any of that, but I do have some bacon. So I'm going to cook this bacon. And turn my heat down just a little bit. So I'm just going to cook this bacon until the fat has rendered off and this bacon is nice and crisp. I'm going to remove the bacon and put it in my little cup here. This is a heat-proof cup. And then we'll add our beans and everything else to it. So I will come back after I remove the bacon grease and we'll get these beans started. All right, so this bacon is nice and crisp. I went ahead and removed the bacon grease. I've got it sitting here. We're just going to leave that alone. We'll use it later. I'm going to add some onion. I got half of an onion here. And I'm just going to let this cook up for, I don't know, about a minute or two, because it's also going to cook up in the while the beans cook. I just want to get these a little soft before we add the beans. So this should take about a minute. And I can smell that onion. So we're going to go ahead and add our beans. Now I've got a pound of butter beans here that I have already picked through. I took out any bad ones, any rocks that were, that are in there, and then I gave them a good rinse. So I'm going to add them in there. And I'm also going to add some water. Now you want to add a good amount of water, so I'm probably going to add about 8 to 10 cups. Okay, so that is 10 cups of water. And I'm just going to give these a stir. Now I'm not going to add any salt to this. I find that if you add salt, it takes an extra long time for the beans to cook. But if you like to add salt at this point, you go right ahead. I'm just going to add some seasonings to this. You can add whatever you want. So let's see what we're going to add. I've got some good old garlic powder here. Probably about 2 teaspoons. Add a good flavor to it. And let's add some onion powder to this. About 1.5 teaspoons. Let's see, how about a bay leaf? Let's get a little small one. That should do the trick. Now you can season your beans however you want. It just depends on whatever you like. I'm going to add probably about 1/2 teaspoon of a smoked paprika. Probably not even that much, about 1/4 teaspoon. And then we'll add some pepper. That should be good for now. And then I'm just going to go ahead and bring this up to a boil. And then I'll bring you back. All right, y'all, so this has come up to a boil. It smells delicious, but we've got a ways to go. But first, we're going to degas our beans. Now, this is something that my grandmother did, and I still remember her doing this when I was a child. She had this great, big old-fashioned 1800s cast iron stove. It was gorgeous. So I remember her getting up and making breakfast on that and making
beans and just whatever else on that. So when I make beans, I always think of her. If I could ever find one of those ginormous cast iron stoves, I would love to have one just in her memory, but they are so heavy and so expensive. Maybe one day. But anyways, I've got 1/8 teaspoon of baking soda. We're going to add this in here. Now it's going to foam up quite quickly, so go ahead and make sure you have a spoon nearby to scoop out all of the gunk that is going to rise up. So here we go. I'm just going to give that a stir. We're going to let that degas all of the beans, and we're just going to scoop as we go. So all of this foamy stuff, we're just going to scoop right out. And then we're just going to let these cook until the beans are nice and tender. It just depends on if you pre-soaked your beans or not, how long it's going to take. So these should take about, I don't know, an hour, 2 hours. But they're going to be delicious. So I'm going to go ahead and finish scooping this out, and then we'll make us some cornbread. Alright, y'all, hopefully you can see everything. I've got my skillet here. I've got a little bit of Crisco. You can do avocado oil, olive oil, vegetable oil, whatever you have on hand will work just fine. You need about 2 tablespoons. And I've got my oven preheating to, or it's preheated to 400 degrees. I'm going to pop this in the oven and let this melt and this pan get really, really hot while we make our cornbread. Okay, for our cornbread, if you want a lighter cornbread, you can add a flour to your cornmeal. I think I have a cornbread recipe up on my blog, so you can just kind of go off of that one if you want. But I've just got cornmeal today. And to that, I'm going to add some baking powder. We're going to do about 3 teaspoons. And we're going to do about 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda and about 1 teaspoon or so of salt. You can add more or less, or you can just leave it out. I'm going to go ahead and kind of mix this up with my hands. Make sure there's no clumps of baking soda or baking powder. That is horrendous to bite into. I've done that so many times. It's like a little pocket of bitterness in your bread or cornbread. Alright, so that looks nice and combined. I'm going to add in about, I don't know, 1/4 cup, 1/3 cup of Crisco. You can do lard. Whatever you have on hand will work just fine. And I'm just going to mix this together until it's kind of crumbly. And this will help melt down in the oven and get those nice little pockets of fluffiness. So just take your time and do this by hand, or if you have a little doodad, I've got that here somewhere. Here it is. If you have one of these, you can use one of those. It works just as well, but I'm going to do this by hand today. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want the little clumps of Crisco or lard to be kind of small. But if you have a few bigger pieces in there, that's fine. Not a big deal. That looks about good. So I'm going to give my hands a little rinse, and then we'll add some eggs and some buttermilk. Before I add my eggs and my buttermilk, I'm going to turn this into a cheddar jalapeno cornbread. It's going to be so good with those beans. So I'm just going to add, I don't know, a good 2 handfuls of cheddar cheese. Now I keep mine in the freezer. I just shred it up from the block, put it in a Ziploc bag, and keep it in the freezer. It keeps really, really well that way. And I've also got 1 jalapeno here that I've just seeded and diced up very small. But you can keep this plain if you don't want to add anything to it. You can make this a cheddar bacon cornbread. You can add whatever you want to it. So I'm just going to get this all mixed up. You want the cheese and the jalapeno to be coated in that cornmeal, so that way it all don't sink to the bottom when you bake it. Alright, so I'm going to clean this up, get a little room here, and we'll add our eggs. Alright, so I've got 2 eggs. I'm just going to add that right in there. And I've got some buttermilk. Now I go by feel, but it should take between 3/4 of a cup to 1.5 cups. Just depends on how thick your buttermilk is. So I'm just going to add a little bit and kind of go for there. And this is pretty thin, so I'm going to go with about 1 cup. And we're just going to mix this together, break those eggs apart, and get this mixed. And that cornmeal hydrated. I'll do about another 1/2 cup. So that's about 1.5 cups. Alright, I want it a little bit more liquidy than this, so I'm going to go in and add about another 1/4 cup. Get that mixed in. So that would be 1 3/4 cup of buttermilk. Now mine's pretty thin, so you just have to adjust it depending on the thickness of your buttermilk. And that looks pretty good, you guys. So I am just going to let this hang out while my cast iron skillet is heating up in the oven. And this cornmeal is going to absorb that buttermilk, and it's going to make the kernels of that cornmeal a little bit softer. And this is something that I do all the time when I make cornbread. It just makes it where it's a little bit less gritty. So I will bring you back when I get this in the oven. Alright, y'all, so this pan is nice and hot. It has melted down the Crisco. I'm going to grab my cornmeal mixture. And we are just going to pour this right in here. And it's going to start cooking that cornbread immediately. And it's going to get a nice crust on it. And kind of smooth that out just a bit. And we are going to put this right back into the stove and let this cook, depending, about 20 to 30 minutes till it gets nice and crispy on the bottom and it's cooked completely through in the center. All right, y'all, the beans are cooking back here. They're right there. I've got the cornbread in the oven. It's almost done. I've got my bacon grease right here. I'm just going to add all of that right in here. And my skillet is over medium-low heat. And I've got some thinly sliced onion, about 1/8 of an inch, as well as some thinly sliced potatoes. And all of this is going to go right in here. As soon as that onion and those potatoes hit that pan, that bacon grease, there is no better smell. It smells so good. So I am going to grab a spoon and we're going to season these potatoes up. We're going to add a little bit of pepper. Now season to taste. You can season with whatever you want. Now if you've been here a while, you know we love pepper. So add as much or as little as you want. And we're going to add some salt. Let's do a little bit of garlic powder. Probably about 1 to 2 teaspoons. And let's do a little bit of Lowry seasoning. Just a little bit. About 1/2 teaspoon to a teaspoon. And let's do a little bit of paprika just to give it some color. And that should be good. Just give this a stir. Get all these spices mixed in and coated on those potatoes. This is smelling good. So once you get all of this coated, all of these seasonings coated on your potatoes, you're just going to leave them alone and let them cook about 5 minutes. And then you're going to come in and kind of flip them around and let them cook on the other side so they get nice and crispy. Or if you want them tender, you don't have to cook them that long. Just depends on you. So those are nice and coated. I'm going to let these alone and let them cook. I'm going to check on my beans. I'm going to check on the cornbread. And then when all of this is done, I'll bring you back and I'll show you the plates.
Alright, y'all, the cornbread is done and I just sliced it into wedges. The potatoes are also done. They are delicious, smelling good, nice and crispy. The beans are done. They cooked for about 2.5 hours, so they are perfect. Now I just served this with the beans in a small bowl with some of the potatoes on the side as well as the cornbread. Now we like to put butter or honey butter on it. Sometimes we like to crumble the cornbread up and put it into the beans. Sometimes we dip it. Just depends on how we're feeling that day. But you can serve this however you want. But this was so good.
All right, y'all, today I wanted to do something a little bit different today, and we're going to make some chicken parm. I've got my oven preheating to 350 degrees. I've got a pot of water coming on to a boil on the stove, and I've got some oil coming up to temp on the stove as well. And I've gone ahead and sliced my chicken breasts in half, and I've got a little bit prepped. So I've got some flour in this bowl, some panko breadcrumbs, and I've got a couple of eggs and some milk. And this is for the breading on the chicken. I've also got a little plate here to put the chicken on. So we're going to go ahead and start seasoning everything up. I like to season my flour and my breadcrumbs, and the eggs are going to act as a binder to hold the breadcrumbs onto the chicken. So we're going to go ahead and start seasoning the flour and the breadcrumbs. We're going to season it up with a little bit of pepper. And we're going to add a little bit of salt. to my breadcrumbs, I'm going to add some thyme, probably about 1.5 teaspoons. And to both my flour and my breadcrumbs, I'm going to add some paprika, about 1/2 teaspoon here and about 1 teaspoon here. I'm going to add the same amount of this Cavender's to both the breadcrumbs and the flour. We want it very well seasoned. And if you season both the flour and the breadcrumbs, you get double the seasoning. It's absolutely delicious. So I'm going to go in and add a little bit of onion powder. Probably not that much. So we'll just break this little ball up and put that back in here. So that's about 1 teaspoon. We'll add a little bit to this. We'll just break that up with our hands when we mix it up. And then I'm going to add some garlic powder. Okay, and I'm just going to mix this together. Make sure it's all nice and combined. Okay. And I'm just going to go in here with my hand with this so I can break up these little pieces of onion powder. All right, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and give my hands a rinse, and we're going to beat up these eggs, and we'll get going. All right, so I've got my little setup here. I've got my chicken. So what we're going to do, first we're going to take off our jewelry because we don't want flour all in our jewelry. That is a pain to clean. So we're just going to take a chicken breast, and we're going to put it in our flour. Make sure it's all nice and coated, so that way the egg sticks to the flour. We're going to put that in the egg and get that all nice and coated. Let the excess drip off. And then straight into the breadcrumbs. We're just going to flip this over a couple of times, make sure this is all nice and coated, and then we're going to put it on this plate while we finish up the rest. Now, I don't have a recipe for this, I'm just kind of winging it, but you season to your taste and make it however you want, and it will be delicious. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish up the rest of this, and then we'll move on over to the stove. All right, you guys, so I've got my oil here. It's just plain vegetable oil. You can use whatever you have on hand, and it's to temp. So we're just going to layer this down in this oil, and we're going to let this cook on both sides for about, I don't know, 4 minutes or so until they are nice and golden brown. Then we'll flip them over, cook them another 3 to 4 minutes until they are golden brown on that side and they're completely cooked through. Now I've got my temperature down to low medium, and we're just going to let these hang out, cook, do their thing. I'm going to salt my boiling water right here, and I'm going to wash a couple of dishes and get my 9 by 13 inch baking dish sprayed and ready to go. We'll come back and we'll go on to the next step. All right, y'all, I've got my chicken here. They are nice and golden brown and cooked completely through. And I've also got some pasta sauce here. You can use any kind that you have on hand, or you can make your own. I like to make my own. It's very simple. It's just crushed tomatoes, or you can do tomato sauce, some herbs, a little bit of olive oil, salt and pepper, and if you want a little sweetness to it, you can add some sugar. But super simple. You just combine it all together, put it on the stove, and let it cook for 20-30 minutes, and it is super delicious. So I'm just going to add a little bit of this on the bottom of my pan. And I've already got it greased with a little bit of avocado oil. So I'm going to put probably 3/4 of this on the bottom. It's going to make a nice, delicious sauce once we put it in the oven. So I've got that, and I've got my chicken here, and I'm just going to lay my chicken in here as best as I can. Kind of like so, like that. Kind of mix it down in there. Okay, I'm going to give my hands a little rinse. And I'm just going to take the rest of this sauce and kind of put it on the top of this chicken. And it's going to be so delicious. Super simple, but very, very delicious. I've got some mozzarella cheese here and a little bit of Parmesan cheese, and I'm just going to pile this on top of this chicken. It's going to melt down and get so delicious and super cheesy. You can add as much or as little cheese as you want. Okay, and this is ready to go in the oven, and I'm just going to put this in the oven until the cheese melts, about 5 to 10 minutes. I've already got my pasta on cooking. It's almost done. It should be done right about the same time the chicken is, and then we'll make our plate.
All right, y'all, dinner is done and it smells so delicious in this house. But I just went ahead and added some of the pasta down on the plate, topped it with that delicious chicken with some extra sauce, sauteed up some green beans in a skillet with butter, salt, and pepper. Super simple. And you guys, this was so delicious. I hope you guys enjoyed this week's video. I truly enjoyed spending time with you in the kitchen today and this week. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this week's video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to leave me a comment in the comment section down below. Don't forget to check out all of the recipes. I will leave my recipes and similar recipes down for you in the description box for you to try. So yeah, I will see you all next week. Bye.